Welcome back to another episode of Archaeology Crime, where we dig up history one scandal at a time.
C'est un scandale ce que tu me fais là. C'est scandaleux, hein?
And today we are going to unravel one of the most jaw-dropping tales from the trafficking scene, that of Giacomo Medici, one of the dirtiest dealers of them all. Think Indiana Jones, except Medici is less the heroic adventurer and more a villain disguised as a protector of cultural heritage. And spoiler alert, there are no Nazis to fight in this one.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
But we do have Swiss vaults, dirty Polaroids, and a whole lot of fancy museums acting like they didn't know better. Our story begins not in some dusty ancient tomb or a jungle, but instead in an auction house, where the Carabinieri squad, essentially Italy's version of monuments men, an elite unit charged specifically with investigating antiquities crimes, starts getting suspicious. You see, it's the mid-1990s and there's a new trend in the antiquities market. At even very prestigious auction houses like Sotheby's in London, artifacts are cropping up that have the provenances, that's sort of the paperwork showing where it came from, which are sketchy at best and blatantly falsified at worst.
See, now that's some bull.
One of the biggest red flags came from a sarcophagus lid, spotted and pretty quickly identified as something looted directly from a Roman church. Yep, you heard that right. A chunk of a church's literal history was sitting in a London auction house catalog like a secondhand lamp at an estate sale. The obvious question was, how did looted artifacts make it all the way from Italian soil to this tony London auction house? That question led to one of history's most infamous traffickers, Giacomo Medici, and boy, what a tangled web he wove. Now, just who was Giacomo Medici? Well, buckle up because this was no small-time operator. In fact, he began his criminal career in Rome starting in the 1960s. Picture this. A young Medici wheeling and dealing his ways through the Eternal City's back alleys like some kind of an art smuggling startup founder. Except by the 1970s, he was no longer just any dealer. He was the guy. You see, Medici had close connections with Italy's infamous Tombaroli. That's a fancy Italian term for tomb raider. Like the minions of Vamangia, who we covered in the Indian Antiquities heist video, these guys would loot archaeological sites, churches, etc. under the cover of darkness and hand over the goods to the Kingpin, for a price, of course. One of the most infamous items trafficked by Giacomo Medici was the Euphronios crater, a stunning Greek drinking vessel crafted around 515 BC. This masterpiece of ancient art, attributed to the painter Euphronios, who was sort of the Leonardo da Vinci of ancient Greece, well, it depicted a famous scene from a Homeric legend, the dying Trojan hero Sarpedon being carried off the battlefield by the gods Thanatos and Hypnos. Celebrated for its exquisite artistry and historical significance, was sold in 1972 to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York for $1 million, a staggering sum at the time.
You're going to have to pay me $1 million.
However, it was later revealed that the crater had been looted from an Etruscan tomb, leading to its return to Italy in 2008. And once the Carabinieri were on Medici's trail, it of course turned out that his dealings didn't stop with the crater. He was involved in trafficking numerous other significant artifacts, including intricately painted Greek amphora, ancient Roman bronzes, and marble statues, all illegally excavated or just plain stolen and smuggled out of Italy. Among these was a rare kylix, a drinking vessel attributed to the painter Onesimus, as well as the marble torso of a youth, both of which made their way to prestigious museums before their illicit origins were uncovered. Medici's empire spread to the US all the way from Italy via Switzerland, where, fun fact, Switzerland's Freeport warehouses became an international hotspot for stashing looted art. Picture this: storage rooms filled with dirt-encrusted artifacts which were lovingly cleaned and photographed for sale on the international market. And these photos would later come back to haunt Medici in his criminal trial. Medici made so much money laundering stolen artifacts that he drove a Maserati and lived in a big house with a window shaped like the letter G. Subtle, Giacomo. And coincidentally, if you recall that Indian trafficker I mentioned earlier, well, he smuggled his stuff through that same Freeport facility and also was helped by the same Sotheby's employee, James Hodges. A disgruntled Hodges would later spill the tea on all this to British journalist James Watson, who in 1998 published a tell-all book on the Sotheby's shenanigans. So, how does such a prolific and successful trafficker finally get brought to justice? Well, Medici was cruising comfortably through the 80s and 90s, selling pieces to big-name buyers like the Getty Museum in Los Angeles and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. But things started to unravel in 1995 when a freak accident blew the lid on this murky antiquities trafficking underworld. Just south of Rome, a former Italian police officer named Pasquale Camera flipped his car upside down and, not wearing his seatbelt, was instantly killed. When the Popo got there and searched the vehicle, right in the car they found some of those Polaroids we just mentioned, depicting that ancient Greek and Roman art. So Camera had some exciting Polaroids. Get it? Then when they later searched Camera's house, they came across a very special org chart, which laid out some of the key players in the looting world right in black and white. And there's Medici right near the top, as well as other key players in the trafficking world, like Bob Hecht. Maybe I'll do a show about him. And hint for any of you watching who might be criminals: don't write it all down. And it didn't take too much sleuthing to figure out which Giacomo Medici that was on the chart, leading the Carabinieri, working with the Swiss authorities, to raid Medici's facility at Geneva's Freeport. Now, this proved to be the Antiquities mother lode. Brace yourself for these numbers. Authorities found 3,800 artifacts, 35,000 documents, and over 4,000 Polaroids. You see, Medici was so bold and acted with such impunity that he meticulously cataloged everything, like a proud parent taking pictures of their kid's sporting event. And those showed some of the artifacts fresh from the ground, still with dirt on them. I mean, the smoking gun could not have been smokier if it had frickin' flames shooting out of it. And with that, this trafficking kingpin was brought to justice. Fast forward to 2003, and Medici's day in court finally arrives. Picture the Palace of Justice in Rome, grim and concrete. Medici, all suited up, insists that he is totally innocent. He even claimed he was planning to donate all of the stuff in his warehouse to museums. Sure, Giacomo, that's definitely what you did with all the other things whose provenance you faked and then sold for millions.
A bullshit artist.
The trial was, simply put, a debacle. Medici gave hours-long diatribes, attempted to confuse the court, all the while sweating profusely and blaming everyone else. But unlike in Hollywood, that strategy did not work here. Judge Montoni was not a man with a lot of patience for Medici's shenanigans.
Let's get there fast, because I'm quickly losing patience.
The trial dragged on for years, but in 2005, Medici was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison and fined $13 million. Ouch. Note, however, how long this took. 10 years since that fateful car crash. Like I always say in these cases, even when justice comes, it takes a long time. Of course, Medici being Medici immediately appealed, but this time most of the charges stuck. But if you think this is the end of the story, think again. The case had major ripple effects for museum collections around the world and even uncovered some other trafficking operations like that of Vamengia. So, in this case, we actually have a happy ending.
I love a happy ending.
Oh, you gone soft.
Thanks to the evidence from Medici's case, hundreds of artifacts were repatriated back to Italy. Remember that Euphronios crater? It's safe and sound now, but it was one of the many artifacts that museums like the Met, the Cleveland Museum, the Getty, and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts were forced to return. Some of the artifacts went back so quickly without the usual fight that it made it seem like the museums were trying to pretend like they didn't just shell out millions for stolen goods. And Medici's trial didn't just lead to the return of stolen art. It cast a harsh spotlight on the antiquities trade and the museum's role in it, causing them to set a higher ethical and due diligence standard. Oh, and it triggered yet more scandals, trials, and awkward admissions of guilt within the art world, which we still hear about all the time. RIP to "we didn't know it was stolen" as an excuse. Giacomo Medici's story is a wild ride through the murky underbelly of the art world, and a cautionary tale of greed, ambition, and the price of failing to protect cultural heritage. Sure, his name lives on in the museum world, but certainly not alongside those of Michelangelo or Da Vinci. No, the Medici name will live on in infamy, but on the upside, it spurred a rethink and a revamp of how the whole museum scene works. And so, while I still love me a museum, every time I go to one of these big international institutions, I look a little cockeyed and wonder, how did that get there? But then again, I also don't want to empty all of these museums either. Should we all have to go to Italy to see Italian art? These are questions we, the public, and these big universal institutions will have to start answering for ourselves. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.